Hey y'all, this is Conversations with a Therapist podcast. I am Jennifer Kyalo. I am a psychologist. I am your host. And today I wanted to give you a quick episode based on the newsletter that I wrote about why psychotherapy is not working. The first thing that I want to mention is I put a poll on the newsletter. I was asking people if they have been to therapy. And I don't know if you have been to therapy. Whether it's a yes or a no, this episode is still for you because the stuff I'm going to talk about is related to going to therapy and some of the things you need to be thinking about, as well as some of the things your therapist should be thinking about when it comes to psychotherapy in general. You can easily find this newsletter article that I am talking about in the description box. There's a link there to it, and you can check it out. Go in depth and see the stuff that I am talking about because I think there's a lot of value in it that you can apply to your life. Anyways, in my experience, two reasons why psychotherapy does not work is number one, because of client issues, and number two, it's because of therapist issues. I'm going to start with the first one, the client factors. Why is it that depending on the client, depending on the stuff they bring to therapy, therapy will not work? One of the challenges with modern day therapy is that when clients come to the sessions, they believe that it is a place to get validation, a place where they're supposed to come in and the therapist is supposed to make them feel nice. The therapist is supposed to give them an opportunity for an emotional dump with no clear direction of why they are in therapy. And clients assume that that is actual psychotherapy. In reality, an emotional dump is not psychotherapy. An emotional dump is just that, an emotional dump. So when a client comes to therapy and they believe that the reason they are there is to just get validation and feel nice and walk away knowing that the therapist is making them have a good time, of course, then therapy is not going to work because what they're getting is not therapy. It is just a place for them to go and hang out. And you don't want to be going to therapy to just go and hang out. Because if you needed to hang out, there are places you can go and hang out for a cheaper price without spending so much time and effort getting ready to go to the therapist office. Or even if you're doing it virtually, I'm sure there are other ways you could use that time other than going to therapy to just feel nice. And I'm sure you have friends. So those are people that could make you feel nice instead of paying a therapist to go and feel nice in the session. When a client comes to therapy believing that therapy is a place for them to feel nice, of course, they are going to get disappointed when it is actual therapy. But if the therapist is colluding with them and encouraging that validation kind of stuff and encouraging them to spend the time just venting without doing actual psychotherapy, then of course the client is going to leave there thinking, why do I pay this person so much money for me to just come and vent? As a psychologist, as a client, you need to understand what therapy is for. In general, therapy is for personal change. When you go to therapy, you are saying, I want to change as an individual. If you're not changing as an individual when you go to therapy, then there's a likelihood that what you are going there to do is just pastime. I've also noticed that some clients come to therapy believing that therapy is the place to get fixed and that their therapist is like a messiah, somebody who is supposed to rescue them from their problems. So when they come to therapy and the therapist puts them to task, the therapist encourages them to do something about their problems. The therapist requires them to sit with difficult emotions and to explore what they can do for themselves, and the therapist is not giving them direct answers to their problems, then clients can start assuming that therapy is not working just because they are being asked to do the work of therapy where the therapist is not rescuing them. If you're going to therapy to be rescued, then again, you are in the wrong place. I have been a therapy client and I know the appeal. I know why it can feel that if you defer decision making to this authority figure who is your therapist, you're thinking that they can give you the right answers because you think that there's a right answer to your problems and that right answer lies in somebody else. Ordinarily, that is a faulty way of thinking because you are the expert of your life. Only you know what you want to do with your life. Yes, your therapist can help guide you. Your therapist can give you a perspective that you haven't experienced before. But being a savior is not the role of your therapist. And actually, if you go to therapy and you notice that your therapist is trying to save you from your problems, they cannot let you sit with difficulty. They cannot let you sit with conflict and ambiguity, then you should be very concerned because your therapist's role is not to be a savior. Your therapist's role is to be your therapist. Those two things are not the same and they do not even exist in the same world. Another reason why I think psychotherapy does not work is when the clients come to therapy and they are coming to collect tools and techniques and worksheets and to-do lists and homework. But after they have been given these toolkits, when they have been given these worksheets and homework and all these activities, they still go back home and they feel that therapy is still not working for them. Of course, that makes sense, because one thing you're going to discover with time is that there's no toolkit that can heal your trauma. There's no worksheet that a therapist can give you that can help you heal your trauma or heal the difficulties you're going through. Let's say you're grieving. A worksheet is not going to help you grieve. It can give you some tips on how to work around your grief, but at the end of the day, there's some things you have to sit with for a very long time because they are part of being human. They are the difficulties that we experience as human beings. And it is important for you to come to an acceptance that there are some things you're never going to fix with a worksheet. There are some problems you're never going to solve by doing homework, therapy-related homework. Some of the big questions of life will not be answered by you getting a toolkit to work around the problem. Most of the time when clients come to therapy thinking that that is what they want, they quickly realize that that is not what they need. Wanting a quick fix, it does not mean that you need a quick fix. And sooner or later, the quick fixes stop working. What we need as individuals, what we need as human beings is an ability to tolerate ambiguity. We need to develop an ability to sit with complexity. We need to get comfortable with sitting with uncertainty. And that is scary for very many people. You're not the only one if you're struggling with this. So it being scary does not mean that it can't be done. It can be done and it should be done. At the end of the day, as I've said, your therapist is not going to rescue you and a worksheet is not going to heal your trauma. Other techniques will help you heal your trauma if it's trauma that is taking you to therapy. Other techniques are going to make it easy for you to live with the reality of the losses that you're going through, if that is what has taken you to therapy. But at the end of the day, not a worksheet. Honestly, a worksheet is just something temporary, kitu ya kushikilia, something that just helps you cope. It's a coping technique. And so are other things like breathing techniques and all these emotional regulation techniques. Those are strategies for coping. But real psychotherapy requires you to sit with difficulty and your therapist to sit with you in that difficulty. And they should not be people who run away when difficult emotions show up. That is how you need to be thinking about psychotherapy. So those are some of the ways that I have seen clients can struggle with therapy. Those are the ways I have seen that psychotherapy can fail because of the clients. Those misaligned expectations and the realities of therapy can be very problematic. When you come to therapy and you think that it's going to be easy, it's going to be very convenient, you're thinking that it's going to be fancy and the change is going to happen very fast. You're thinking that people should clap for you that as you go along the way. All those things are going to make it difficult for you to actually do meaningful psychotherapy. At the end of the day, remember that feeling nice is not therapy. There are cheaper ways of feeling nice. And if you're going to therapy to feel nice, then you are going there for the wrong reasons. What underlies psychotherapy is personal change. So if you go to therapy and there's no personal change that is happening, then maybe you're not getting the most out of therapy. You could be getting coping skills. I'm not saying that you cannot get coping skills from psychotherapy. You can. And maybe at the stage you're in right now, coping skills is what you need. Maybe at this stage you're in right now, toolkits and worksheets and homework is what you need. Maybe that is what is going to help you because maybe you're in a crisis and you need to cope right now with whatever is going on. But at the end of the day, for psychotherapy to actually cause significant change in your life, you will have to go beyond the superficial worksheets and techniques and homework. That's all I am saying. And I don't know if this is something that you have experienced either as a therapist or as a client. And if you have, I would love to hear your experience with going to therapy with misaligned expectations and what happened in those scenarios. You can also listen to that episode I did on the things you need to know before you go to therapy. So basically how to go to therapy. And that can help you understand some of the questions you need to be asking yourself and the expectations you need to be having when it comes to therapy, or even some of the expectations you need to let go of when it comes to psychotherapy. So think about it that way. Think about the fact that you will not get the most out of therapy if you are going there to feel nice, if you're going there to vent, if you're going there for a toolkit acquisition program. That is not going to be beneficial for you in the long run. It's going to be just another temporary patch that you're doing for the sake of doing. And then you can tick off a box and say, I actually went to therapy and therapy does not work. The second part of why psychotherapy does not work is what I would call the therapist factors. And these are basically the way the therapist is showing up in therapy, the way they are addressing your issues, and what they are bringing to the process of therapy. Just to piggyback off what I mentioned about the toolkits and the homework and all these techniques and tools that your therapist might be giving you, sometimes a therapist can think that giving these tools, giving this homework is therapy. And so their measurement of whether therapy is working or not is your compliance to that homework. If you do the homework, they're like, oh yeah, things are going well. If you don't do the homework, they're like, what's going on with my clients? Why are they not doing the homework that I assigned them? Or why are they not using the toolkits that they came to collect and I give to them? A problem with that could be the therapist thinking that if I give tools, if I give worksheets, if I give homework, at least I am doing something. Because we have this tendency to equate doing something with being productive. We assume that doing rather than being is what psychotherapy is. We forget that sometimes therapists and clients are struggling so much with the doing because the doing is taking away from them being just human beings. When we are struggling with, let me do something, let me do something, let me do something, as therapists, we give a lot of tools, we give a lot of techniques, we give a lot of toolkits, a lot of homework, so that we can justify to ourselves that we are actually doing something for the client, which I believe is problematic, because if you are doing all those things, if you are doing therapy by giving all these worksheets and toolkits, you are probably not sitting with the client in their suffering. You're probably not sitting with them in their darkness. You're probably not sitting with their heavy emotions and sitting with them in those heavy emotions, because those heavy emotions are very scary. If that is you as a therapist, you believe that sitting with difficult emotions is too scary for you, then of course this is something I would encourage you to look into. Get supervision if you have to, talk to other psychologists and see how they handle heavy emotions in therapy, because therapy is about the heavy emotions. I am sure your clients have people in their life who cannot sit with heavy emotions, people in their life who cannot sit with difficulty, people in their life who cannot allow them to just be. There's this constant need and desire and pressure to constantly be performing. The reason they're coming to therapy is probably because they're looking for a place where they can just be, a place where they can pause, a place where they can sit in silence, a place where they can rest, a place where they can stop performing, a place where there's no expectation of them to continue doing things. As a therapist, that is a challenge I give myself and I give other therapists, to think about what this constant doing, this constant giving and supplying of tools and resources is doing. What is the benefit of it? Who is it serving? What's the purpose? Why are we constantly giving things to clients? And just because a client is asking you for these things, it does not mean that that is what they need. You need to be able to discern from the clients presenting issues and the reason for coming to therapy. You need to be able to discern what exactly they need in therapy. I am not saying rescue them. You cannot, and you should not. And if you aspire to rescue your clients, you're probably working wrong. So sit with yourself for a moment and think about why you have this desire to keep supplying tools to the client just because they're asking for them. And once you give them, ask yourself if you are giving them these tools just to calm your own anxieties, or you're giving them these tools because you believe they are going to supplement the work that you guys have already done. That is a question that you need to be constantly asking yourself. And also work on your own inability to sit with difficult feelings. Work on your own inability to tolerate ambiguity, your own inability to tolerate uncertainty and complexity. Those are things that you need to be able to figure out for yourself as an individual and as a therapist, because the work of therapy is very, very hard. It is not appreciated just how difficult being a therapist is. It is one of those careers that is just very demanding, and not just of your time, but also of you as an individual. I am sure some of you are familiar with the concept of the person of the therapist, using yourself as a tool in therapy. And that is something that we can talk about in another episode. It has helped me use myself in therapy as a tool, as an agent for change, and to instill hope in my clients. And I hope it's something that you can also think about for yourself. Another part of the therapist's factors that can make psychotherapy not work is when a therapist is very committed to one pet theory or one way of working, and they believe all their clients' problems can be seen through or addressed through one way of looking at things. I'll give you an example. Let's say you attended a workshop, a webinar, or a summit, or a symposium, whatever, and they were talking about trauma. And they were talking about trauma-based interventions. They were talking about how many people have experienced trauma in this world, and many people come to therapy because of traumatic events that have occurred in their lives. They are struggling to continue living their lives because of these traumas. Once you hear that, for some reason, that becomes the theory that you love the most. And because you have seen a lot of trauma in therapy, you start to believe that all clients who come to therapy have trauma. They have experienced trauma in their life. They have been traumatized in one way or another, and they are suffering, and they cannot cope until that trauma is addressed. Now, the problem is not that people have experienced trauma. The problem becomes when you believe that every single client that you see and every single problem that they have is based on trauma. They have undergone trauma, and it is the reason why they are in therapy. But then sometimes that's not true, because not all people who have experienced difficult things will be traumatized by them. Some people will actually grow from the trauma that they experience. Actually, most people grow from the trauma that they experience. If you are committed to explaining your client's problems through a trauma lens, through and through, every single client, every single problem, every single thing that you encounter in therapy, if it can only be explained through a trauma lens from where you come from, then that becomes a problem, because then you will start trying to fit your clients to the trauma modality, whatever modality you're using. If you are practicing and you're thinking that every client is traumatized, then you will try to fit them into that model because you've already decided in advance that this client must be traumatized and their trauma has to be explained and it has to be healed before they can eventually live with themselves, or before they can proceed with their lives, or before they can get back to some semblance of normalcy, If that is the way you operate, of course your clients are going to rebel. And they will not rebel by like calling you names or beating you up. They will rebel by becoming resistant. And they're not becoming resistant because they're bad clients or because they don't want psychotherapy. They're probably resisting because you're trying to fit them in a model that you've already created in advance before they even got to therapy, or even in the first session. You've already decided that this is the only thing that can explain my client's problems. You do not sit there and create a model in your head and you decide this is the one that I have to fit all my clients through. If you do that, you are going to do a disservice to your clients. People are different, people are multifaceted, people have experienced different things, and their issues can be explained in a myriad of ways. So, as a therapist, it's your role to become open minded, to understand that there are very many theories of psychology that exist, there are many theories of psychotherapy that are out there, and each one of them has been useful for clients somewhere in the world. Otherwise, it will not exist, right? And that does not mean accept every model and use every single model in therapy. That means be open to looking at things from a different perspective. Be open to learning, be open to experiencing different psychotherapy models, and be open to trying out different ways of operating. I'm not saying jump from one model to another. I'm not saying when you go to therapy, do not have a grounding. I am saying there are many ways of seeing the same thing. And you are allowed to look at different concepts, to look at different models, and to try and see how best to serve the client, not how best to fit the client to the predetermined model that you have in mind. So that is a way that psychotherapy can fail, when the therapist is committed to just one way of working. And I know maybe you are going to push back on this by saying that you are trained in a particular model. Maybe you are a CBT therapist. That's the only model that you are trained in, or you're committed to working with. Maybe you are trying to become an expert in CBT. And so the only way that you see working moving forward is becoming more committed to the CBT path, learning all the things you can about CBT, trying to help clients using CBT. That's well and good. But tell us that in advance. Don't wait for the client to come to therapy with things that cannot be explained through CBT, and then you're forcing them to fit in a CBT model. You're allowed to be like me. I'm a CBT therapist. That's the only thing that I do. Do not come to me with problems that cannot be dealt with using CBT. Nobody will beat you. You can do whatever you want. You're an adult. You're the one who went to school, right? So you're allowed to choose a model. But what I am saying is, do not try to fit your clients into predetermined models. Be open to learning different ways of being. So I think I have belabored that point, and I'm going to move on and just say the final thing, which is, if you're a therapist and this is the role you think that you play, you believe that your role is to rescue your clients, you believe that your role is to fix their problems and give them a lot of advice. Kwanza, there's a lot of advice giving in therapy right now, and I'm not liking it. Anyway, that's a story for another day. So if you believe that your role is to give them direction and tell them what to do and give them advice, then I think that you have a very misguided narcissistic savior complex, which you need to keep in check. It's very seductive to believe that you can solve people's problems, to believe that you went to school for 4 years plus to get your degree, to come out here, fix people, and tell them what to do with their lives. That is very narcissistic of you if that is how you operate. I highly encourage you to actually just like put a check on that, because That is a serious, serious, serious issue. It is not your role to save people. It is not your role to rescue anyone. You do not have the mandate to tell people what to do. People make decisions for themselves. Even if your client is a child, it is not your role to tell that child what to do. You're not their parent. You are not the person that was put on this earth to tell people what to do. Let people make their decisions and drop the desire to rescue clients. It is in the rescuing that you are making things worse for them. The moment you start rescuing people, you take away their agency. The moment you take away their agency, they become dependent on you and they build resentment against you for depending on you. That is how you need to be looking at this. As a therapist, you don't want your clients to depend on you per se, like over dependence on you. You want them to benefit from therapy and benefit from the relationship you have, but you don't want them to wake up in the morning and believe that you are the only source of support for them. If you isolate your clients and make them believe that you're the only one who can take care of them, who can protect them, who can fix them, who can help them solve their problems, you are isolating them and making it difficult for them to actually live a meaningful life, a full life. And you are practicing unethically. Yeah, I said it. You're practicing unethically if you're isolating your client and making them believe that you're the only person in their life who can solve their problems. First of all, you can't solve their problems. Two, you're not the person in their life. You are a person they see once a week. A week has 168 hours. You're seeing them for 1 hour out of 168 hours. This client has been making decisions in their entire life without you. You just met recently. You don't know each other like that. So don't overestimate your position in your client's life. And also don't forget that clients are actual adults. Okay, sometimes they're children, but clients have their own brains. They have the capacity to make decisions, and you're taking that away from them the moment you think that it is your responsibility to make decisions for them. I will end by saying that therapy is a very collaborative process. Therapy is a process that requires both the therapist and the client to apply themselves. It requires a lot of commitment. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of effort. Therapy requires you to bring the versions of yourself that you keep hiding from everyone else, bring them to the therapy room so that your therapist can help you build a life that is meaningful to you. Therapy requires you to change as an individual, and it hurts. Therapy is painful sometimes because you are changing yourself. You're not changing the world. You're not in therapy to come and make the world a better place per se. As a therapist, I am also not in therapy so that I can stop all the bad things that are happening in the world or in your world. Yes, there are bad people in your world. There are people who are hurting you or people who are making it difficult for you to live the kind of life that you want to live. Yes, those people exist, but I can't stop them. As a therapist, I cannot fix the people in your life. I can only work with you to change yourself. So when you come to therapy with me or with any therapist, know that you're going to therapy for personal change, not for any other type of change. And if you're not ready for personal change, if you're going to therapy for any other thing than personal change, then probably you will not get what you're going for. Or what you get is not going to be actual, meaningful psychotherapy. It's going to be something. I'm not saying it's not going to be anything, but it's not going to be like deep, meaningful psychotherapy. Deep, meaningful psychotherapy requires personal change. Personal change is painful. If you have been to therapy and it worked, please let us know in the comments. Give us some hope. Tell us that therapy really went well for you and what things contributed to therapy actually working for you. If you've been to therapy and therapy did not work out, please let us know in the comments so that we also know what to avoid or the lessons that you learned so that you can learn from you as well. If you've never been to therapy and you're thinking of going to therapy and you have questions about psychotherapy, please let me know. The comment section again is your playing field. I would be happy to learn from you guys. And with that said, I encourage you to go and read the full newsletter article. It's on my Substack. My Substack is called Mental Wealth by Jennifer Kyalo. You can Google that and you will see it. Share it with somebody if you think that they would benefit from it. And I guess that's where I'm going to end. Go forth and thrive. And yeah, bye.